And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. Again, stop and think. Where did these men come from? They came from Judea. They came from the headquarters, the Christian church headquarters, the leadership, the head office, the corporate general conference of the time of the Christians, who happened to be primarily Jewish converts from Judaism. So they're coming with high credentials from their GC, and they're coming to teach the new church plants and telling them, listen, this stuff you might have heard by some renegade preacher called Paul is not the full story. We're going to tell you the rest of the gospel now. If you don't get circumcised, like Moses says, none of you are going to be saved. This is the picture we get from this verse. Just think of what mindset they must have had. I'm putting it this way so we can appreciate it. Brothers and sisters, the same problem exists today. Nothing much has changed. And these men who came from the head office with big credentials, and they visited these new church plants and the new Gentile converts, and one of them was Galatian, and confused the church there. So the church started thinking, well, maybe we have to do this stuff that they're saying because they came from the Jerusalem and the apostles are there. We better do the works of the law, you know, the law of Moses. Yeah, that makes sense. So Paul hears about it. So he fires off this letter to the Galatians. He says, you foolish Galatians, what are you doing? Now he says this, not me. He says, I taught you the gospel, but you received the gospel by the hearing of faith or the works of the law. What are you doing? Who's bewitched you? That's what he tells them. This was not some, unbelieving Jews who had rejected Christ. They were not the cause of the problem. The problem was from their own brethren, the Jewish Christians who went about following where Paul went to try and give their limited view of the gospel and hindered this mystery which Paul was called to preach. They thought the Gentiles needed to be converted to Judaism and become Jews. And God's plan for the scope of the gospel, not to turn the world into Jews, but to make them Christian, believers in Christ Jesus, the all-sufficient Christ. Big difference. And the key player in that, of course, was Paul. Now, like I said, this wasn't the only verse we were going to read. Let's look at another one. We're in Acts 15. Let's drop down just a little bit. Verse 5. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed. Which believed what? In the Messiah. In other words, Christians. These are Pharisees who accepted Jesus, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. Here is the issue spelled out, plain and simple. So they said, okay, we can't dispute the fact that the Gentiles are going to receive salvation as well. We can't argue with that, but they have to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses. And then it says here that they were Pharisees. So they're Pharisees, they're experts in the law of Moses who had accepted the Messiah, but they still felt that salvation was not complete in the Messiah alone. No, you still have to do all these other things spelled out in the law of Moses. And they gave Paul the greatest headache because they would send their missionaries and their students and their workers and their disciples to all these churches that Paul established, and they would turn them into Jewish churches, keeping the law of Moses. With the Messiah as well, on the sides now with this. So no wonder then Paul writes to them, you're keeping days and years and this and that. Let no man judge you with the feasts and all these issues that relate to the law of Moses. Not just circumcision, all the aspects that the Jews felt were requirements for salvation, were all these illustrations that were given that Christ would actually bring the reality of. When Christ brought the reality, that's what we have now. They were still caught up in that, and they went about causing all this trouble. This is the mystery of the ages we're talking about. This is some of the issues in the apostolic church. And this is what God did to reveal this amazing truth, and that's why he picked Paul to do it.